I had the craziest dream last night about a girl who was turned into a swan, but her prince falls for the wrong girl and she kills herself.
One of the producers on The Wrestler, Mark Heyman, who was also my director of development, said he wanted to write something. And I said, what do you think of the ballet project? And he got deep into it and said, there's a lot of similarities between this and The Wrestler. And I wasn't afraid of them. I thought it was an interesting thing because one's about the highest art and one's about the lowest art, if you want to call wrestling an art. I think they're both about performers and about performance, and both performers, put their bodies before their health and age and their physicality is the big challenge to that. Well, the ballet world was a very hard world to get into. Usually when you make a movie, doors open up. You say, I want to make a movie, and everyone's like, okay. And the ballet world just really couldn't care. And I think that's, they're just very, very insular and self-involved, and they don't care about, they're very, very focused. So it took a very, very long time. And slowly but surely we met a few dancers that were interested in sharing their stories. And we did a lot of research. And eventually choreographer Benjamin Millepied came on, and that sort of gave us a stamp of approval because he's very well respected at the New York City Ballet and in the ballet world. And then slowly but surely they helped us out. Well, it was a really difficult film to make. After The Wrestler, and everyone was like, what are you doing making a film about wrestling with Mickey Rourke? And we had, the success we've had with it. I thought it would get easier having, Natalie Portman and Vincent Cassel and Mila Kunis and Winona Ryder, but it was very, very difficult. It was probably raising the money, and Scott can talk more about this, was harder than raising the money on The Wrestler. And I think 2 weeks out, the money fell apart. And I don't even know if my actors knew this after training for months and months. But then we were very lucky, and we quickly got Fox Searchlight to come in with a few hands and knees begging. And then it was very, very difficult. I mean, because we had so little money, every single day was really difficult. There was never an easy day. Every day was like, oh my gosh, we have to do all of that today. And then the next day was like, oh my gosh, we have to do that. So it was like, how many days? 41 days, Scott? 42 days of a huge hustle. And then, of course, all the money that ended up while we were shooting meant there was no money for post. And we have over 300 visual effects shots. And it was so, basically it was really, really hard until now. Now we're here at this fancy hotel, and suddenly there's money. So, and very early on, I wanted to do it. I knew that I wanted to get the camera on the stage with the dancers, because I think, when you're in the audience, it's very, very dance is very effortless. These dancers train their whole entire lives and basically make all the effort disappear. And then when you go backstage, you suddenly see all the muscles and tendons and blood and sweat and breath. And as a director, I was like, well, how am I going to show that? So I knew I wanted to get the camera on stage and get it out of the wings, which is how most people have seen ballet. But I was a little nervous about kind of bringing this cinema verite style that I had used in The Wrestler, this handheld style, to a psychological thriller / horror film, because I thought that the documentary feel might kind of suck out the tension, because people might think, why doesn't Natalie turn around and say to the cameraman, hey, help me out here or something, So, but no one, I couldn't think of an example of a movie that had used a handheld camera. And so we were really debating it. And then eventually we said, screw it, let's just give it a shot and see what happens. And then as far as designing those dance shots, it was you couldn't really storyboard them because the camera's too fluid. So we would, me and Benjamin Millepied, the choreographer, would talk about which scenes of Swan Lake we wanted to do for story points. And then I would tell him what was happening in the story. And it was interesting because he would then turn it into movement. Usually when I work with actors, I tell them what the story is, and I get to watch them turn it into emotion. So it was interesting to see it story transform into something else, into a different type of kinetic form. And then he would sort of choreograph something, and I would look at it and give some notes, and then we would eventually bring the video camera out, and we would start moving with it. So it was almost a third dancing partner. And then we would create an interesting movement. And then when we would get to the stage to actually shoot it, it became very complicated because there would be spotlights and other dancers and shadows, and all these issues would come up. And Maddie Libatique, our DP, would have to figure out how to work around the camera to create the illusion that we weren't there. I love grain and that aesthetic of it. I think it's beautiful and adds a texture. And I think, you know, it's weird because when you're watching a movie, you're not watching reality, you know. Either if it's in 2D or 3D, it's like something that's not real. So, you know, I'm not sure you should really make things try to look real, you know, because you can never really quite get it there. So I'm into stylization of the work so that it takes on its own aesthetic and life. And I think, you know, 16, doing a feature on 16 just doesn't happen that much in the universe anymore, and it actually adds to something.
My ways. She's after me.
The physicality. I mean, it really was the hardest. I think everything else kind of came alongside with that. But I think just transforming your body at the age of 26. I wouldn't say I was alone in this. I think everybody across the board in this production, if they played a dancer, somehow, somewhere got hurt. So I would say that was the most challenging for myself.
Well, as you've seen, I don't dance that much in the movie. But I could have, actually. At a certain point, there's one scene where I direct Natalie's character, and I don't know why, but I thought reading the script that would be some kind of a dancing scene. But I've seen Michael Baryshnikov directing a young dancer, and he wasn't moving at all. He was only like slightly showing what he was doing. So when we got on the set, we got into that vibe where actually the dancing wasn't really required, and it was more about, you know, helping her, following her, you know, and that looked more like an ex-dancer than if I started to prove, you know, that I could spin around or stuff like that. So, but I did train 17 years ago, as you can see. When I was much younger, I had the opportunity to be really close to a man called Michael Bennett, who was the director of Chorus Line, Dreamgirls, Ballroom. You know, he was actually one of the biggest Broadway directors ever. And he was a good friend of the family when I was younger, and my father actually played in one of his plays, Chorus Line in London. And so I had, you know, I've seen him work with the dancers. And he was really close to what I'm doing in the movie, meaning that he was a real jerk with dancers, but it was only to get them where you want them to go. So, and he was gay, and that's a pretty big difference because my character is not gay at all, as you've seen, and he's actually using his sexuality to direct his dancers. Well, obviously, she really worked a lot on that. She was very focused, you know, on the dancing. In a way that I have to say, I've been impressed by, you know, the amount of work that she put in the physical transformation as a dancer. So I have to say that I was so impressed by the way she got involved that I didn't want to interfere with her, you know. So I would let her do what she had to do, because she was going back like to warm up between more or less every takes, you know. So she was always training, and the body was hurting, blah blah blah. So, you know. Then when we had to do scenes together, she's really going for it. You know, she doesn't, you know, she's not like a typical actress who doesn't want to kiss or whatever. You know, she just goes for it, and she's having fun with it, and she's doing it really well, and so it was easy.
I would say I was lucky that I got to work with a friend of mine, but you know, she's a brilliant actress, and she's amazing to watch. So I mean, I can go on, and there's nothing bad I can say. She's absolutely everything you'd want her to be. She's, you know, she's beautiful to watch while she's working, and she's great off screen. Like she's perfect.
But what about the kissing? Do you agree with me?
Mila?
That was coming. Huh?
Well, I didn't think it was going to be coming from Vincent. I mean, I've had this past 2 days, but Vincent. Yes, what he said.